He stands at the pinnacle of success, surrounded by wealth, power, and influence. Everything he once fought for is now in his hands, yet a strange emptiness lingers within him. The battles that once defined his existence are over, leaving him with a sense of aimlessness. His name carries weight, respected by leaders, feared by enemies, and admired by those around him, but he wonders if they truly see him or just the empire he has built. With no more wars to fight, no more betrayals to overcome, he begins to question, what comes next? He reflects on his journey, the struggles that shaped him, the betrayals that made him stronger, and the old woman who saw something in him when no one else did. She had guided him, tested him, and ultimately transformed him. But now, without her presence, he feels lost. A realization dawns on him: his entire life was built on a foundation of struggle. Now that the struggle is gone, what remains? He has more wealth than he could ever spend, more power than he ever dreamed of, yet none of it fills the void inside him. He watches others, people who work tirelessly for every meal, those who chase their dreams with relentless determination. He was once like them. Now, he wonders if he has lost something vital along the way. Seeking clarity, he withdraws from the world, retreating to a quiet place where he can think without distractions. He remembers the old woman's words: power is not the goal, it is merely a tool. What you build with it, that is what matters. But what does he want to build? For the first time in a long while, he has no answers, only questions and a journey ahead to discover what truly matters. The sun was beginning to set when a stranger arrived at his grand estate. Dressed simply yet with quiet dignity, the man carried an air of confidence. He was not like the businessmen, politicians, or opportunists who often sought his time. There was something different about him, something unsettling. Without an appointment, the visitor had managed to pass through the guards. It was as if he knew he would not be turned away. When they finally met, the stranger's gaze was piercing yet unreadable, as though he held knowledge even he, a man of power, did not. The first words the visitor spoke sent a chill through him. She helped me once, a long time ago. Now, it is time for you to repay the debt she left behind. The mention of the old woman was unexpected. Years had passed since her death, yet even now, her influence reached into his life. He had believed he knew everything about her, but the presence of this stranger suggested otherwise. Curious yet cautious, he asked for details: what debt, what favor? But the visitor did not answer directly. Instead, he handed over an old letter, its edges worn, its ink slightly faded. The letter was written in the old woman's handwriting, yet it was not addressed to him, but to the stranger standing before him. As he read its contents, his heart pounded. It spoke of a promise, a commitment she had made long before she met him. Something unfinished, something urgent. And now, she had left it to him to complete. You were chosen for a reason, the stranger said. She knew this day would come. The words unsettled him. What had the old woman been hiding? Why had she never spoken of this debt? And why, after all these years, was it being brought to him now? The visitor gave him a choice: walk away and pretend he had never received this message, or step forward and uncover the truth behind a promise made long ago. The decision weighed heavily on him. He had spent his life battling enemies, overcoming obstacles, and proving himself to the world. But this was different. This was not about power or wealth. This was about her. And for that reason alone, he couldn't turn his back. Underscore 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 underscore. The invitation arrived in an unmarked envelope. No name, no sender, only a symbol embossed in gold. Unlike any offer he had ever received, it bore no flashy proposal, no desperate plea for investment or influence. Just a simple message. You have been seen. You have been chosen. The world is shaped by those who sit at the table. It is time for you to take your place. At first, he dismissed it as a hoax. He had dealt with powerful people before, business moguls, politicians, even criminals. But this felt different. Days later, a messenger arrived, calm, professional, and eerily well-informed. The man spoke with unsettling certainty, as if he already knew the answer before the question was even asked. You built an empire from nothing. You have influence in places most men can only dream of. But power without direction is wasted. We offer you purpose. For years, he had stood at the top, but this was a different level. They spoke of decisions that shaped economies, conflicts that never made the news, and alliances that extended beyond nations. They were not politicians. Not businessmen. Something else entirely. The world is controlled by those who understand its true nature. Join us, and you will never be powerless again. The offer was intoxicating, ultimate control, knowledge beyond imagination, a seat among those who dictated history. But there was a price. Loyalty is absolute. Once you step in, there is no turning back. There is no stepping out. Are you ready to bear the weight of true power? The gravity of the decision pressed upon him. Was this what he had been searching for, a new purpose, a greater cause? Or was this just another trap, one he wouldn't escape from? He looked around at the life he had built, at the lessons he had learned. His entire existence had been a fight for control over his own fate. But now, the question was different. Did he truly want to control the fate of the world? The answer would change everything. He never expected to see them again. Years had passed since their last encounter, and in that time, his life had transformed beyond recognition. The struggles of his past, the battles he had fought, the power he now wielded, it had reshaped him into someone even he barely recognized. And yet, here they were, standing before him like a ghost from another life. The moment their eyes met, memories flooded back, the hardships they had endured together, the whispered conversations in the dead of night, the dreams and promises they once shared. Back then, he was just a boy, fighting to survive. Now, he was a man of influence. But had they remained the same? Their first words were not pleasantries, nor admiration for the empire he had built. Instead, they came as a warning. You're walking a dangerous path. There are things you don't know, things that could destroy you. The words unsettled him. Not because he was afraid, but because of the weight behind them. This wasn't just a reunion. They hadn't come back just to see him. They had a purpose. The conversation that followed was filled with half-truths, guarded expressions, and the unspoken tension of old wounds. They claimed to bring him information about the secret organization that had reached out to him, about the old woman's past, about the choices he was about to make. But could he trust them? Time had changed them both, and the world they lived in now was full of deception. Were they here to help him, or were they just another test, another piece in a game far bigger than he had realized? As he watched them leave, he couldn't shake the feeling that their return was no coincidence. The past had a way of finding him. The only question was, had it come to save him? Or to destroy him? Underscore 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 underscore. He had learned to expect betrayal. His entire life had been a battle against those who wanted to see him fail, rivals, enemies, opportunists. But this time, it was different. This wasn't an outsider. This was someone he trusted. The realization didn't come all at once. It started with small things, decisions made without his knowledge, deals slipping through his fingers, whispers that didn't quite make sense. He ignored them at first. After all, he had built an empire through resilience. He had survived worse. But then, the cracks widened. One night, as he reviewed his records, he noticed a pattern: resources missing, transactions altered, private information leaked. Someone was working against him. Moving in the shadows. waiting for the right moment to strike. His first instinct was to suspect his enemies. But the truth was more painful. The betrayal had come from within. The final blow arrived in the form of undeniable proof, a document signed by someone he had trusted completely. Someone who had stood beside him through his rise. Someone who had sworn loyalty to him. When he finally confronted them, their face remained unreadable. "You should have seen this coming," they said, their voice calm, almost pitying. "You always thought you were in control. But power blinds even the smartest men." The word stung. Not because they were wrong, but because he had let himself believe otherwise. After everything he had been through, after all the betrayals, all the battles, he had convinced himself that he had built something unbreakable. He had been wrong. This wasn't just about money or power. This was personal. A slow, calculated deception. A knife driven deep by a hand he had once trusted. Rage boiled inside him. But so did something else. Pain. Not the pain of losing wealth or influence. The pain of knowing that no matter how high he climbed, trust would always be a weakness. Now, he had a choice. Would he let this betrayal break him? Or would he turn it into the fuel he needed to rise once more? Underscore 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 underscore. The warning had come too late. By the time he understood the full scale of the conspiracy against him, the walls were already closing in. His assets were being frozen. His allies had gone silent. The media was painting him as a man on the verge of collapse. This wasn't just an attack. It was a dismantling, a carefully orchestrated destruction of everything he had built. And the worst part? His enemies had been planning this for a long time. Every step he had taken. Every deal he had made. Every person he had trusted. It had all been watched. Calculated. Used against him. The betrayal from within had only been the beginning. Now, a much larger force was moving against him. And if he didn't act fast, he would lose everything. He had two choices. Run and watch everything fall. Or fight and reclaim what was his. There was no time for hesitation. His first move was to secure what little he had left. He reached out to the few loyal allies who remained, those who hadn't been swayed or bought off. They warned him of legal traps, of board members plotting against him, of enemies who had infiltrated even his most trusted circles. But he had one advantage. He knew how to survive. While his enemies thought they had backed him into a corner, he was already planning his next move. They had underestimated him. And now, he would make them regret it. The deeper he dug, the more unsettling the truth became. At first, it seemed like a desperate search for answers. A way to understand why all of this had happened. But the more he uncovered about the old woman's past, the more he realized. She had never truly left him. Her influence. Her decisions. Her secrets. They were still shaping his life. And then, he found it. Buried deep in old letters, hidden in erased records. A truth he was never meant to see. She had planned everything. The proposal. The marriage. The inheritance. None of it had been fate. It had been designed. A plan set in motion long before he even knew she existed. But why? Piece by piece, the mystery unraveled. She had once been powerful. Wealthier, more influential than he had ever imagined. But she had lost everything. Betrayed, just as he had been. And she had spent years preparing for revenge. But instead of fighting back herself, she had created something greater. A successor. Someone who could rebuild what she had lost. Someone who could finish what she had started. Him. Every hardship he had faced. every lesson she had taught him, every battle he had fought. It had all been leading to this. And now, standing at the edge of the truth, he had a choice. Would he walk away, leaving her past buried? And then, the fire consumed everything. Some called it justice, others called it fate. But he knew better, this was not the end. The old woman had prepared him for this moment long ago. She had taught him how to survive even when everything seemed lost. She had warned him that power was never permanent. Now, standing amidst the ashes of the empire he once ruled, he realized this was just another test. But this time, he was no longer the helpless boy who had once wept on his wedding night. This time, he knew how to rebuild. Life in exile was brutal. No money, no allies, no resources. He had once worn the finest suits, but now, he was forced to live in the shadows. The streets that once whispered his name now ignored him entirely. But he still had one thing left, his mind. Powerful men fell because they relied on wealth, but true power was never in money, it was in knowledge, in strategy, in resilience. And those, he still had. He would use them. He started again, not as a businessman, but as a nameless laborer. He listened, observed, and learned. He built connections in the darkest corners of the city, places his former allies would never dare to enter. He spoke to the people who had been ignored, those who had nothing, because once upon a time, he had been one of them. And then, he found an opportunity. A small opening, a single chance to start over. It was not grand, nor glorious, but it was enough. Brick by brick, he began to rebuild. But this time, he did not build an empire of gold and power. He built one of knowledge and influence. He would not make the same mistakes. He would not trust the wrong people. This time, he would rise, not as a king, but as a ghost, unseen, unstoppable. Because if he had learned one thing, it was this: no matter how many times he fell, he would always find a way to rise again. Failure had taught him everything that success never could. When he lost everything, he had two choices: remain defeated or start again. The boy he once was, the one who cried over an unwanted fate, might have given up. But the man he had become knew better. He had fallen before. He had survived before. And this time, he would not just survive, he would rebuild. But not in the way he had before. His past had been built on wealth, on power, on the illusion of control. He had fought for a throne that could be taken from him, trusted people who turned against him, and relied on riches that vanished overnight. This time, he would not make those mistakes. This time, he would build something that no one could take away. The first step was patience. He did not rush. He did not try to reclaim what was lost. Instead, he watched. He studied those who had betrayed him, the ones who had stolen his empire. They had his money, his businesses, his influence, but they did not have his mind. And that was their weakness. While they celebrated their stolen victory, he worked in silence. He started with nothing but his knowledge and the skills the old woman had taught him. She had taught him how to see value where others saw nothing. So he went to the places no one else was looking, the forgotten corners of the world, the people no one paid attention to. And there, he found his foundation. This time, he did not chase power. He built it from the ground up. He created opportunities for those who had been abandoned, just as he once had been. Instead of seeking businessmen and politicians, he surrounded himself with those who understood struggle, because he knew they would never take success for granted. At first, the world did not notice. His former enemies laughed, believing him finished. The media had long moved on, writing him off as a cautionary tale, a man who had everything and lost it all. But he did not care. Because power was not about being seen, it was about being felt. And when the time was right, they began to feel him. Slowly, the cracks in his enemies' foundations began to show. Their greed made them blind. Their arrogance made them weak. They thought they had won, but they had only taken a throne built on sand. And as they stumbled, he rose. But this time, he was not just taking back what was his. He was building something even greater, not a kingdom made of money, but one made of loyalty. Not an empire ruled by fear, but one built on respect. He no longer needed grand offices or flashy cars to prove his power. When the world finally noticed him again, they were shocked. He was not just back, he was stronger than ever. The men who betrayed him now feared him. The ones who doubted him now admired him. And those who had stood by him from the beginning now stood beside a leader who had risen, not once, but twice. The greatest comeback was not about reclaiming an old empire. It was about building one that could never be taken away. Everything had led to this moment, the betrayals, the losses, the lessons. Every pain he had endured had prepared him for this final war. This was no longer about revenge. It was bigger than that. Now, it was about the people who had stood beside him, the ones who had believed in him when the world turned against him. It was about proving, once and for all, that true power was never in wealth alone, but in resilience, in strategy, and the will to survive. His enemies thought they had won. They had stolen his empire, spread their lies, and convinced the world he was finished. But they had underestimated him, again. They had always seen him as a poor boy who had lucked his way into power, never realizing that survival had always been his greatest skill. This war would not be fought with weapons alone. It would be fought with patience, intelligence, and control. And when the battle began, it was unlike anything they had expected. His enemies had money, but he had strategy. They had power, but he had purpose. They fought to protect what they had stolen. He fought for something real. One by one, their empire crumbled. Their lies, their corruption, their exploitation, it all collapsed. And he stood at the center of it all, not as a man seeking revenge, but as a leader who had fought for something greater. This was not just his victory. It was a victory for everyone who had ever been doubted, betrayed, or cast aside. He had won the final war. But more than that, he had changed the future. He stood at the peak of everything he had built. And yet, for the first time, he felt no need to claim it. The battles that once defined him were over. The enemies had fallen. The wars had been fought. And now, he had nothing left to fight for. But that was the point. He had already won, not just in the way the world measured victory, but in a way that truly mattered. His legacy would outlive him. It no longer needed his presence, it would stand on its own, shaped by those who had believed in him. The world expected him to stay, to rule, to bask in the power he had fought so hard to reclaim. But that was no longer the path he wanted. So he walked away. Not in defeat. Not in regret. But in peace. He had spent his life chasing survival, wealth, power, respect. And now that he had them all, he realized they were never what defined him. He had been given a chance to build something greater than himself. And he had done exactly that. People would tell his story for years to come, not as a tale of a poor boy who became rich, but as the story of a man who never stopped fighting for something beyond himself. The story had ended. But the legacy would live on forever. Or would he embrace the path she had set for him, knowing it would change everything forever?